We are so glad that you have joined us this morning for Transition Tuesday, focusing on disability disclosure. I'm Amber Ham. I'm the Training and Outreach Coordinator with Kentucky SPIN. And before we jump into the material, we'll go over just a few housekeeping items here on the next screen. A little bit about Kentucky SPIN. We are funded by the U.S. Department of Education under IDEA since 1988, when Kentucky first received a PTI. Kentucky SPIN Parent Center provides training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disability, birth through 26 years and beyond, their parents, families, as well as professionals that assist them. At Kentucky SPIN, we do not act as attorneys. We are not attorneys. We do not represent families or youth. With that being said, we do empower families and youth to effectively advocate for themselves, their children, and their families. By providing a peer-to-peer support model, we help families access needed information and resources. Today's training is not a training of trainers or a TOT. This is for educational use only. We do not allow other agencies or folks to train the material that we are presenting today. No third-party recording or streaming of our services are prohibited. And we will be providing links throughout the training this morning. If you're unable to get those links right away, don't worry. We will email those out to you within 24 hours of the webinar. And just we ask for a little grace as Kentucky SPIN staff does work from home. There may be a brief interruption or a noise in the background. No fear. We have several staff on here to pick up where one may need us to support them in that moment. So at this time, I'm going to pass things over to Nick and Davis and let them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about who they are.
Hi, I'm Nick Carpenter. I am the youth educator for Kentucky SPIN, and I have a autism diagnosis. I received an autism diagnosis at the age of 4. I am currently the crisp age of 27, and up here on this slide, I just have a couple of disabilities that I have and that I disclose and I am very open about. So I have executive dysfunction, ADHD, and autism. And these are disabilities that directly affect me in the workplace and in real life. But these are also disabilities that I am educated on, that I know how they affect me. I know what type of accommodations I deserve to have with the disabilities, and I am able to still live a comfortable adult life at home and in the workplace or wherever I may be, due to the disclosure skills that we're going to go into today. And now I'll hand over to Davis so that he can introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Davis Rodriguez. I'm the transition age parent educator. I have ODD, OCD, and ADHD. And I have learned through some trials and error to properly disclose these things and how to adapt my everyday life to having them. Back to
All right, so briefly, we're going to go over today's topics, and then after this, we'll have a short little video about disclosure share. But first, today we're going to be talking about disclosure. So both of us just mentioned that we have disabilities, and these disabilities affect our lives. And when we come out, like we literally just did, and we talk about the disabilities that we have, and we briefly mention how they affect us, that's what we mean when we say disclosure. That's what disclosure is. So today we're going to be covering important topics like knowing yourself and your disability, why disclosure is important and matters, the pros and cons of disclosing, and lastly, how disclosure varies in different situations. And now I will be handing it briefly over to Davis for a short video on disclosure.
Disclosing your disability is a very personal decision. It means making an informed decision when or if to tell someone about your disability. Your decision will affect you at work, in your social life, and at school.
I am taking classes for early childhood education so I can get my certificate in early childhood development. I disclosed my disability when I started college because I knew that it was going to be way different than high school, and I wanted to have a good start on my college careers.
What the Disability Resources Department does at the school is it will provide you reasonable accommodations, and you go and get a letter of accommodation checking off the accommodations you need in your specific disability, and you give that letter to each of your professors.
I took the note taker option, and I took sitting in the front of the class and extra time on tests, and that really made my college semester go by really nicely.
I learn best by hearing and describing. I can't really do diagrams or drawings at all. So one of the ways my anthropology lab professor accommodated me this last semester was he let me describe things rather than have to draw them out like other people.
Employers can't discriminate against people with disabilities if they're qualified, and they need to provide reasonable accommodations to do the job.
I work 3 different kinds of jobs. I work in an office, I help my dad at the flea market, and I'm a DJ.
I did over workability, and I did for 3 years or 4 years. And they liked me so much that I could volunteer for them. And as of November 11, I got a job part-time for a couple hours.
I believe it does help to let your employer know that you do need accommodations, because for instance, for me, it helped me do my job a lot better than I would have if I didn't have those accommodations.
Well, when they ask me if it's time to discuss it or whatever, I just tell them like, well, I have a hard time like learning stuff, and this is how I learn. I need them to write down the instruction that gave me an example so I can know a better way of helping them out and doing the job at the best that I can to my ability, you know. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm very confident in that.
Self-determination is the desire, ability, and practice of directing your own life. It's who you are and who you want to be.
When I tell people about my disability for the first time, it feels good because I'm proud who I am, and I don't care what people think.
I recognize that people are in all sorts of different positions as far as comfort levels, but I just find that the people that are worth having in your corner are gonna understand.
Like if you were to ask me, where do I see myself in 10, 15 years? I'd probably say being a photographer, getting married, having kids, and living a wonderful life.
Disclosure is your choice. You decide.
This video was developed in collaboration with the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, Yo Disabled and Proud program, and the National
Okay. So now let's get into the why, when, what, whom, and how of disclosure. So why should you disclose it? Well, you yourself have the right and the ability to choose whether to tell your employer, teacher, professor, whoever it is, about your disability after finishing high school. This is something, and we'll get into some pros and cons here in a little bit, but this is completely a you choice. It is your responsibility to disclose a disability if there is certain specific help and accommodations that you will need after high school. It is your responsibility to make the decision whether or not to disclose. Um, and then when is knowing when to share this information is important for a successful life, because even though there's a lot of different things we say, and people have different opinions on whether you should disclose or how you should feel about having a disability. There's a lot of conflicting opinions on that. ultimately, my opinion is that you don't always have to share your disability if you don't need to. Me, I'm very open about mine. I tell everyone about my disability if it comes up in conversation. That's just how I am. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to always disclose your disability to everyone, but it's important to know when to share the information in order to get accommodations and to have a successful life if you need to. And it's important to know what to share, because again, you don't need to share every single detail about your disability unless you want to or need to. I would consider just sharing at least what is affected by the situation and sharing what you need to get those certain accommodations or those supports you may need. And again, especially in the workplace, not maybe this might not necessarily matter so much in like college, but in the workplace, in a smaller environment compared to like high school or like college, you want to really carefully think about who you tell sensitive information to, especially when it comes to disabilities. Um, it's kind of, I mean, again, for me, like I'm very open about my disability. I don't try to conceal it or hide it or anything like that. But you might want to consider who you share the information with. It might be kind of a need to know thing. Like maybe depending on what it is and your accommodations and how you feel about it, maybe only your manager and the people above you need to know about your disability and the information related to it. Your other coworkers, it might not be any of their business really what your disability is. Um, and that's kind of something that you just have to determine how you want to approach that yourself. And then lastly, practice disclosing. I really, especially like, I don't know if I can't speak for any of the youth that may be watching this, but I know growing up for myself, when I started seeking employment and when I was looking at post-secondary education for college, my dad and mom, for example, would always have me do practice interviews. Like doing practicing, like, well, I had never done an interview before, so we'd go through like interview questions, things like that. And they would also have me practice disclosure because obviously my disability affects my work ethic in certain ways. So I would practice disclosing how my disability affects me, type of accommodations I needed, and things like that. So that's something to consider is practicing. I would definitely consider practicing how to share your information with a trusted individual, be it like a teacher, special ed teacher, parents, whoever it may be. I would recommend practicing disclosure with them, so that way you can kind of know what you should share, maybe if you're oversharing, undersharing, that kind of stuff, to get that preparation. Let's go into a few pros here. So knowing when to talk about your disability can help you a lot. Being open about your situation can help build your confidence, and when you share details about your disability, you help others understand what you need. This understanding can lead to support and adjustments that make it easier for you to achieve your life goals. Talking about your disability can also improve your relationships. If you have like friends or if you're making friends or if you're getting into like a little more maybe more serious relationship with like a significant other, it's kind of important if these are people that you're going to spend most of your life with or just a long period of time with, it might be good to let them know that you maybe have certain disabilities that affect you, how those disabilities affect you. Um, like I'm very open again. I know I've said this a lot, but I'm very open about my disability. Whenever I make new friends, and even still, I still make new friends if I even though. But I always I don't always immediately bring it up, but I do bring it up pretty early. Like when it feels natural in conversation, I'll be like, yeah, I have autism, and I'll bring up how it affects my social abilities and how sometimes I might just randomly close off, and I might come off as really blunt sometimes, and I let people know that so that way, so hopefully, if I do suddenly come off very blunt or very closed off, they don't take it personally and think it has anything to do with them. They know that, well, sometimes Nick is just like that. Um, and also talking about your disability can help encourage empathy and inclusion. By sharing your experiences, you can take control of your situation and create a path to success in your personal and professional life. Now talk about some cons because unfortunately there are downsides to disclosure. Um, So, firstly, is failing to disclose information when you're able can significantly hinder your ability to achieve the goals you set for yourself. If you're in the workplace, and when you have that interview, you don't disclose your disability, and there's certain, let's say maybe you just have certain triggers, things that might just set you off for whatever reason. Maybe you have some form. Maybe you're autistic or you have like a sensory disability, for example. And you don't let your employer know that. You don't let them know that you have a sensory disability. You don't tell them, hey, loud noises randomly freak me out sometimes. They can cause me to shut down. If it's very serious, like if a fire alarm's going off or something, I could go into a complete shutdown or I could go into a meltdown because of that. And you don't tell your employer that. And then that situation does come up, and suddenly your employer's like, yo, why are you freaking out? Like, what's going on? Like, what the issue is? That could cause some issues if if they're just not aware of that possible emergency situation because of a disability, or even just smaller stuff. Like that's a little more of an extreme example, but just not like or like like me, like I let my last job I had before Kentucky Spin, I worked at a hotel as a front desk worker, and I immediately let my manager during the interview, I let both of the people I was going to be working under, I told both of them that I had autism. I told them how the disability affected me, what my weaknesses were from the disability, also what my strengths were, and I was able to like let them know that like, hey, I'm a very active person. I'm a very physically active person. I have a really hard time staying still. I have to move around a lot. And so that way they were aware that if I wasn't at the front desk, because I wasn't a computer guy at the front desk, I just went and I worked at a fancy hotel, so they still had like bellhops who ran and like got things for guests and things like that. So they knew that if I wasn't at the front desk, I still had a walkie-talkie, and they knew if I wasn't at the front desk, I was just probably I wasn't like sitting in a back room, like I was probably walking. I was most likely walking around somewhere through the hotel, like doing a round or going around outside, something like that. And they knew they could just reach me if they needed me for something. But that's why it's important that, if your disability is going to impact your ability to do a job, you might want to disclose that because not doing so can lead to some consequences that could have been avoided otherwise. And then again, without transparency, you may encounter obstacles that prevent you from moving forward and realizing your dreams. And for achieving your goals, communicating openly is an essential skill to be able to stay on track. And as I just mentioned here in these notes, you don't want to have an incident that would have been avoided otherwise had you disclosed. And I feel like there are a lot of pros and cons of disabilities, and I'll go a bit more here at the end. But unfortunately, there's upsides. Unfortunately, there are downsides to disclosing, and it really will just kind of be up to you to determine how you want to approach that. But now let's talk about accommodations. So knowing when to ask for accommodations is important for reaching your short-term and long-term goals successfully. But you will need to disclose to receive accommodations that are not readily offered to everyone. So understanding what accommodations you received in school and why you need them will be a huge help when you are outside of school, because chances are, if you needed this help now, you're going to need it later. So for me, back in high school, with my executive dysfunction that I mentioned in my intro slide, executive dysfunction sometimes makes it really hard for me to complete work. Especially in high school, made it very hard for me to do assignments during the allowed period of time. It's like I can't explain executive dysfunction. It's weird. Only way I can think to talk about it is that it's like a weird switch that turns off on its own, and when it's off, I don't do anything. Uh, and then sometimes it randomly turns itself on. I don't know what the deal with it is. Um, but during school, I would get extended time to finish assignments, and I would have what's a way to describe it? I would have regular check-ins. Let's say I would have like my mom was aware that I had trouble getting stuff done on time. So she would kind of like badgering me isn't the best way to phrase it, but she would basically constantly be like, "Hey, like you had this much time to do this. Like, where are you at on this?" And constantly kind of having that reminder that I need to finish something, that I need to finish an assignment. Um, and this kind of getting this extra bit of grace period to finish work and also getting this regular check-in, this is an accommodation that has extended into the workforce. So here at Kentucky Spin, part of my work is I get a little extra amount of time to kind of finish assignments and kind of fully realize the stuff I'm working on, like the videos and projects I work on. Um, and then I also I have people that I work with, coworkers, they regularly check on me and see how I'm doing and see where I am, where my progress is on certain work projects. And I'm also allowed because, like I said, I'm very physically active. I have a hard time sitting around because of my ADHD. I am permitted at work to get up and take walking breaks and exercise and do things like that. Yeah. So accommodations, they're if, if you have accommodations, you're crucial to success. They're things that you need to pursue in your adult life after high school. Um, back when I was in college, I was able to get access to a lot of the same accommodation I got in high school. The accommodations are a little different because college is a little more strict and college does have different rules than high school. I wish it worked a little bit the same, but that's just how it is. Uh, but being able to get those accommodations in college, just similar, the same accommodations and getting all that helped me, even though college was still a very stressful experience, it did kind of help mitigate most of the stress that I would have. And it also gave me disclosing and going to the disability office, the resource office, gave me access to a support group that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise had I not disclosed and gone and gotten in contact with the people who ran that service. I got access to a whole support group. I got access to tutoring, like free tutoring from people who knew how to tutor people with ADHD, trouble with ADHD and autism, things like that. Tutors who knew how to work with them and help keep them on track. I got access to those. So a super helpful resource that I wouldn't have gotten had I not disclosed about my disability and sought out accommodations. Also, you having a disability and disclosing your disability is protected by federal laws. So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is a civil rights law. This section prohibits discrimination based on disability. And this prohibit applies to any agency that receives federal funds. Section 504 also forbids organizations and employers from excluding or denying individuals with disabilities an equal opportunity to receive program benefits and services. It also defines the rights of individuals with disabilities to participate in, have access to program benefits and services. And then there's also the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, of 1990, is also a civil rights law. ADA prohibits discrimination based on disability. This applies to any agency, regardless of how their funding is received, and it prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. And the purpose of this law is to make sure that people with disabilities have equitable rights and opportunities. And then we have IDEA. IDEA is a federal education law specifically for students with disabilities who qualify at birth to the age of 21. IDEA is a law that makes available a free appropriate public education, also acronymed as FAPE, to eligible students with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures special education and related services to those students. Students who qualify under IDEA are also covered under Section 504 and ADA. Being able to properly disclose your disability and describe how it's crucial to being able to properly disclose your disability and describe it are crucial to receiving supports outside of high school, whether you're in employment or post-secondary or wherever. You are protected. You do have rights, especially your disability. Your disability has rights. You are protected against discrimination federally, and while I will say you are protected against discrimination. This does go back to the pros and cons things. There is a pro that you are protected from discrimination. There's also the con that even though technically legally you're protected from discrimination, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be discriminated against because people are still discriminated against for various reasons today in today's society. So you may still be discriminated against, and that's why when I go over cons, when I went over cons. It's important to remember that I encourage disclosure. I think disclosure is very important, but it is important to be aware that disclosing your disability and why it's important to know who you're disclosing to and what you're disclosing, it can still potentially open you up to discrimination. So it's just important to be aware of that. And while again, I encourage disclosure, it's very important to get the accommodations that you need. That is one of the challenges and one of the downsides that can come up is that even though you're protected, it can still happen, unfortunately. All right. Lastly, just here in conclusion, so educate yourself on your needs. Um, I can't speak for you. Everyone's disability is different. Everyone's disability affects them in a different way. I know how my disabilities affect me. I know the accommodations that I need, the services that I need to use to be successful. Your accommodations and services that you need are completely different. So it's important, and it is your responsibility as a youth, as a young adult that is about to graduate high school in the near future, whether it be 4, 3, 2, 1 year from now, however close you are, it is your responsibility to educate yourself on what needs need to be met for you to have a happy adult life. It is up to you to do your research, to know your disability, to know what accommodations you need, how disability affects you, what its downsides are, all that stuff. It is up to you. It is your responsibility to know that so that you can accommodate, you can disclose, and you can advocate for yourself to get the accommodations you need. And again, like I mentioned, if you want to get accommodations, you're going to need to disclose. I don't want to push you one way or the other to disclosure. I think it's a person by person basis if you need disclosure or not. Some people's disabilities don't affect them um, as impactfully as other disabilities may affect other people. So it's up to you if you want to disclose. However, again, you may need to disclose if you need to ask for accommodations. You need to know how to. Yes, Davis. Davis has some input.
I do. I know for me, when I was in school, I didn't have a whole lot of accommodations. Mine was more modifications where they would go and lessen the stuff I had to do, depending on the class. I also, because of when I was in high school way back, um, that the doctors told my mom when I moved back in with her that they couldn't help my ADHD without aggravating my ODD, which ODD is just like I can be a room full of people and a person can look at me and then I'm just mad. They can be nothing by the look. They just gave me a look because they heard me say something. And I'm just mad for no reason. So it just made it hard for me for being in a large classroom because we would cram 28 plus students in one room. So there's a lot going on. I was easily distracted, easily angered. So I just had a smaller space I worked in. But that just taught me over time. And when I eventually went to trade school, when they pretty much had Nick said, "Oh, you can do this and this." I didn't know about any of that. They're like, "Here you go," and just threw me in. I had to figure it out, and then just over time of learning myself, I had to learn these things, how to disclose the different stuff I had, and then I got introduced to Kentucky Spin, and everyone's Kentucky Spin is supposed to be for ages birth to 26. Well, I'm way beyond 26, and they've helped me tremendously how to be more confident with myself and disclosing my disability. And they're like, "Hey, what do you need? How can we help you?" And just here at work, you know, I write stuff down. I have a sticky notepad. My boss, who's currently not my boss, but I guess she's my boss, Kelly Smith, who's not currently on right now. Um, help me download a screen reader and help me download a thing where I could voice text my words out because I just don't type very well. And some other stuff just to help me get those accommodations. But she gave, Kentucky Spin gave me the confidence to go, "Hey, what do you need?" So, like I said, I'm not trying to push you guys either way, but me personally, has changed my um, life for the better, being able to have the confidence to disclose.
Thank you, Davis. And like Davis just mentioned, talking about modifications, because I didn't mention modifications with disclosure just now. But disclosing also when it comes to excuse me, when it comes to working is that, if you're applying for a certain job that might have a lot of different aspects to it, and you tell your employer, "Hey, I have dyscalculia," your employer might then realize, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have you counting money or have you doing big things with numbers unless you provide the supports for it, as an example. So modifications are also a valuable resource that you can receive. Um, but then lastly, again, like just to reiterate, know your needs, know how your disability affects you, and know how to explain your disability to someone. Know what accommodations you have received for your disability or what accommodations you might be able to receive. And then lastly, again, because as Davis and I have both said, we're not trying to push you one way or the other. Uh, when it comes to disclosure, there's a lot of pros and cons to disclosure. Disclosure is a very important thing to know how to handle it. So it is up to you to decide if disclosure is something that you need to do or not. I I feel like that if you need certain accommodations and those accommodations are necessary for you to be successful, you might need to disclose. But again, I can't say for you without knowing you. I can't say one way or the other. It is ultimately at this point your responsibility to educate yourself on disclosure, to get further education on disclosure and your disabilities and how those two things interact with each other to know if it's right for you. At this point, I will hand it back to Miss Amber Ham.
Hi, Nick. Thanks so much. So we do offer some wonderful resources about disability disclosure that can be used for many ages and stages in one's life. We did put those links in the chat here. As I said previously, if you're unable to grab those in this moment, no fear. An email will come out to you within 24 hours, and you will have access to all of the material that was given in today's session. Nick, can we go on to the next slide, please? I also linked the disability disclosure goals for the IEP in the chat as well. This is a wonderful resource as you're still in school, preparing for goals in your IEP, being that active member, equal member of your IEP team, because this IEP is for you. So having this resource to help assist you with disability disclosure and goals is a wonderful tool to have and use while you're in school. And then on the final slide, oh, we got more resources links. All of these are clickable links in the material you will receive in the email. And then if we could jump forward, here we go. So putting the evaluation link in the chat. This will also come to you in the email. This is a wonderful opportunity. If you're a student here with us today, we ask, well, for anyone that is here, the evaluation form, we want to know what is meaningful to you. What materials would you like to hear more about? What is it that is affecting your life in your world? This is a wonderful opportunity for us to hear the needs of the youth across our state and make sure that we are reaching as many as we possibly can with meaningful material to help them in their personal success. Once that evaluation has been completed, you will receive a certificate of attendance. And that's another wonderful thing if you are keeping a record of any trainings. Maybe that's for later on in post-secondary schooling or for job interviewing. These are wonderful certificates to have to show that you have attended trainings and you're learning about different subject material. So it's nice to keep those and have as you move forward throughout your life and deciding what it is you'd like to do next. If you have any questions or need assistance moving forward, you can reach out to us via phone or email, as well as our social media pages. They're all linked in the PowerPoint. And we do encourage for our youth to sign up to our youth e-news that comes out monthly, that'll come straight to your email box. You'll be the first to get any new materials that we release or videos on our YouTube channels. And it's just a great way to stay connected to all the wonderful materials that our transition team puts out. Back next month. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.